Today, it's a privilege to have with us Mr. Kalyan Paul, who's the co-founder of Grassroots India. Now, along with his wife Anita, who is very passionate about working with Himalayas. And Grassroots has been working on holistic mountain development, and they have pan Himalayan presence rather, and it actually promotes sustainable and self-reliant development in the villages of Uttarakhand and Himachal. A very warm welcome to you, Kalyanji.
Thank
And
you.
yeah, so since I belong to the area, whenever I pass by your office over there, and I find these women who are singing and knitting and working with the lentils and the masalas over there, I'm quite intrigued to find out as to when this journey started. And you brought in so much happiness and so much of empowerment in the lives of the women around that area.
Uh, Look, Anita and me started working in rural areas in India in 1980. And for the first 7, 8 years, we were with the dairy board in Anand and in the milk cooperative sector. And that is where we actually cut our teeth. We learned about community development in practice, though we had studied it in college. But in practice, we really learned it the correct way in the field by organizing over 500 milk cooperative societies and creating a vertically integrated farmers organization. And we had decided when we turn 30, we will like to be in the mountains and devote our lives for mountain development. And that's exactly what we did. We had to leave NDDB, and but fortunately, our leaders over there, they helped us a lot in setting us up in the hills, because it wasn't easy for people to just come up to the Himalaya and start working. And so this was in 1987 when we came to the Kumaon Himalaya in Nainital district, and we started off by living in a small village which actually didn't have electricity or water, plumbed water, or
Mhm.
sanitation facility or anything. But we started off with our kid was that time just over a year, but we were hosted by this couple who was 65 years old, which is my age now. Okay, Mr. and Mrs. Kanai and Lakshmi Lal. And they had
Uh-huh.
lived abroad all their lives, working for a multinational corporation, but they always had this desire that when they retire, they want to set up a development center in the mountains. And so that is how we came in touch with each other when we were in Anand. They had come back to India and they were sort of hunting for, young professionals to, start up a program and an organization. And through Pradhan, I think you know about Pradhan. Through Pradhan, Deep Joshi and Vijay Mahajan, they came in touch with us. And then Anita and me decided to join Kanai and Lakshmi, and he had named the organization Central Himalayan Rural Action Group. So I was the first executive director of the organization in 1987, and we set it up. And so we really cut our teeth in the mountains by setting up Chirag. And we very soon had a small core team of young professionals, from IRMA and from other institutes in the country. And we had very strong support from donor organizations because of our background with the dairy board. And the dairy board in Anand had introduced us. So we had organized good organizations which supported us, and funds are, what shall I say? Funds were really never the problem, you know, to, yeah, we were for, because we already had a track record, of working as rural development professionals. And so what was the problem was to get hold of young professionals to come and live and work within the mountain setting.
Here, I want to stop you here, Kalyanji. Just very curious about why you chose Ranikhet area. It is mainly a cantonment, and when you go forward, we do not see any villages around that road when you pass through Ranikhet. So, what drew you to Ranikhet?
Look, it was just इत्तेफाक से हम रानीखेत पहुंच गए after 4-5 years living in Sitla Mukteshwar, and
जी
then we shifted residence to outside Ranikhet actually. And what you call Ranikhet is famous as a cantonment town, but the limit
जी
is only for a few kilometers within Ranikhet town, in the upper
Mm-hmm.
areas. And where we
Okay.
live, from there onward, is a free village area. And so we started working in the Gagas River basin, which is, below Ranikhet town, because Ranikhet is on the ridge, as you know.
जी
The valley below and the mountains opposite us is Pandokoli, from where Gagas River begins. It originates over there. That's the headwaters. And it's got a set of about 250 villages, this small little river basin. And so that is where we started our work. And why Ranikhet and why not say Bageshwar or Someshwar or something else? I really
Right.
don't have an answer. It just happened to, we had to start somewhere. So we, started in Ranikhet, I suppose.
That's wonderful because you keep on, you take a decision and set that thing right is what the right way to go instead of just pondering over several options and not being able to take a decision. And this is wonderful. And I just want to know, Kalyanji, how did this story begin? How did you get, how many villages are now under your fold? And how did you approach these villages for the kind of work that you had in your mind? What was the first endeavor that
Look,
you took?
for people who are practitioners of the development process of
Ji,
community development, a thumb rule is to go to the people, start a dialogue with the community and figure out which is the, priority sort of set of interventions which the community desires, you know,
right.
which we call the entry point, you know.
Ji.
So
Mm.
the priority for people in Gagas River Basin was the non-availability of safe drinking water. Water was a crisis in that area. And
Ji.
fortunately, we had a innovative method of organizing community managed drinking water systems through something called
Mhm.
an infiltration well. At that point of
Mm.
time in the early 90s, it was demonstrated in very, very few villages, in Upper Bageshwar area. It was completely conceived and designed by a very superb mind, by a person called Dr. Tim Rees, who was a double PhD but decided to come to India, and he was on a spiritual journey in the Sri Aurobindo Ashram in Pondicherry actually
Ji.
for almost 3 decades. And by the time he came up to the hills and we met, and he wanted very much to spread this appropriate technology. And he thought that grassroots would be an appropriate vehicle to take that appropriate technology to the community. So he trained Puranram ji and me. And then soon enough, we started training other barefoot engineers, the local youth. We started training them as barefoot engineers. And it spread from one village to another and from the second to the third. And now we are almost close to 700 community managed drinking water systems. I mean, as we speak
Wow.
this
Mm.
morning down in Rawari village, we completed
Mm.
one system, you know. So,
How
yeah,
is
so
this
that's how it
system that you're talking about, Kalyani, different from the traditional Nola or Nala that was, traditionally maintained by the villagers for water
see,
keeping? Mm.
it's a takeoff from the Nola, because the Nola worked very, very well. And it was just about 6 or 7 feet deep, you know.
Ji.
And it sort of trapped some very shallow subsurface water capillaries into the Nola, and people could come and collect that water in the
Right.
morning, afternoon, or evening, as you have seen. But now with the pressure of population, because what happened is during the colonial times, it started during the Mughal times, the mapping of villages, And but in the colonial time, the British, they sort of formalized it, and they put a map of a village, a boundary rather around the village, an invisible boundary, and said you can't go away from these lines. Rest of it belonged to the Sarkar. Okay.
जी.
So if you look at the census figures, when they did this, a typical village in Kumaon would have 8 or 10 homes, and when there would be more people, like the elder boys, they would just sort of walk away, half a kilometer or 2 miles away and set up another hamlet. But that was stopped during the British era. And so today you see a village in Kumaon, you will see that there are 70 homes, 80 homes, 100 homes. So it became like completely unsustainable because the natural resources of that village originally could only sustain so many lives,
जी.
in terms of water, in terms of tree fodder for the animals, etc., etc. And now if on the same area, with the same amount of natural resources, you have, 100 times more people, so the system becomes unsustainable. So what Dr. Rees really did was he designed a well which could go 25, 30 feet deeper than the Nola. Thereby, you trap more water, subsurface water capillaries. And, typically we get something close to 5,000 or 10,000 liters of water per day coming into this well. And then depending on the need of the community, you can put a hand pump and just draw out that water, every time you need it. Or if it is on top of the village, you can lay a gravity flow system to bring the water down to the community. Or if it is down and the village happens to be on top, you can put an electric submersible pump and pump the water up. Those are 3 ways of drawing the water out. But primarily, it's a takeoff, it's appropriate technology, which is a takeoff of the traditional Nola system.
Nola. So, Kalyanda, I've understood that when your journey started, funds were not a problem, the skills were coming in to you. So, my next question is that did you not face any challenge, any other kind of challenge that you would want to mention?
See, the main challenge which we faced, and we see people even after we've now been there, this is our 4th decade, the 40 years we've been there now. We see the same challenge still exists, because look, you may be very, very skillful and very knowledgeable, etc., and you have been working in Delhi or Rajasthan or Gujarat or wherever. But the thing is, the mountain ecosystems are completely unique. It's a separate set of parameters which govern the Himalayan ecosystems. For example, you may have heard that, kotha people say, bato bato mein ki, Himalayan ecosystems are very fragile,
Yeah.
So let me tell you a very simple example of what it means when you say that it's very fragile, and how we learned, because we had just read about it, and we used to wonder that when we go there, how are we going to figure out what it means that the ecosystem is very fragile. So, for example, we arrived there in 1987 in spring, in March, So by the time the wheat is sown there, it's now in like October, November, December, And you know how the wheat germinates there? Every year in October, November, there's something which is called pala. You wake up in the morning and you see the ground all wet, the courtyard all wet. That's the dew. So that dew helps the wheat seed germinate. And it's so fragile that in some years, if the rainfall in monsoon before that was not appropriate, and some other climatic changes which are happening, as you know, on a global scale, if the dew doesn't fall, that wheat cannot germinate. And in most of the uplands of Kumaon and Garhwal, for the last 15, 20 years, the winter crop has failed. It's simply because of climatic changes, the dew is not falling sufficiently, and people have actually lost most of the traditional wheat seeds which they used to keep and sow year after year. So this is a challenge in professionals, in the development sector, then policymakers, then especially the bureaucracy. Because you see, ultimately the governance of the country is left in the hands of the bureaucracy, of course, under the guidance of the assemblies and the parliament. I'm not denying that. But the day-to-day, year-to-year, decade after decade, the management and the growth of the economy, etc., is left with the bureaucracy. And the bureaucracy means, typically, I mean the Indian Administrative Service and the Indian Forest Service. Now, the Indian Forest Service is extremely significant in the Himalayan region because if you look at the land data in the Himalayan region compared to the rest of the country, majority of the land in the Indian Himalayan region in 10 states is with the Forest Department. So whatever you would like to do in terms of sustainable development in the Indian Himalayan region, if the Forest Department is not sitting on the same table as the rest of the policy makers, the IS, the bureaucracy, you really can't go too far. You really can't go too far.
Absolutely.
And this is one thing which is not recognized in our country, even today. For example, say the Planning Commission of India, which is now the Niti Aayog. The Planning Commission, from 15 years ago, through lot of pressure and lot of debate through the non-governmental sector, the voluntary sector, as we used to call ourselves, they finally put an apology of a desk officer to look after the Indian Himalayan region. They did not even have a single official to look after the Indian Himalayan region, even though 70 million people live in the Indian Himalayan region. It spreads from the west, from Kashmir down to the east in Arunachal Pradesh. It's a huge swath of land. It's got incredible biodiversity. Almost, people say 25 to 40% of India's biodiversity hotspots are within the Indian Himalayan region. It's important for many, many other reasons. For example, as you know, the entire Indo-Gangetic plain upon which 200, 300 million Indians live, all the water, through the river systems flow from the Himalayan.
From the Himalayas.
So the mountain ecosystems are, what I'm trying to say, is extremely important for this country and for the world also at large, and there is no recognition of this fact.
Yeah.
So that is the challenge.
Yeah, it's one of the challenges. And I also read about the work that Grassroots India has done in family farming systems. How did that come about, and what was the work done?
Look, we try to promote and leverage the traditional knowledge in the farming systems, because Kumaon Garhwal mein kya hai, there's a concept called Bara Anaj, They typically have 12 items, at least in their food basket, through the two cropping seasons, the summer and the winter crop. And through whichever policy, let's not, I don't want to sound cynical, but post-independence, especially from the 60s and 70s, through thrust provided by the government of the day as well as the agricultural universities, that there was a massive thrust for promoting monoculture of wheat and rice, and with the result that, that's just 2 crops, compared to 12 crops, the Bara
12 crops.
So finally what happened in 2-3 decades, people's psyche, they thought that, the millets, the jhingora, the madua, the buckwheat, and all other very, very nutritious food was actually not important, because people who were educated, they were running the country, they said, grow wheat, grow rice, So that's one of the things which Grassroots tried to counter and, dialogue with communities and say, hey, let's try to revive all that. And now to revive all that, unless you can link it with the market system, people are not going to do it. They're not going to be able to do it. So here our experience in our dairy board days helped a lot, because the National Dairy Development Board had created a system where, people have all these big words today about the value chain and supply chain and value addition. But so in milk, in a perishable commodity like milk, you could collect it twice a day in the heat of the day, like in Gujarat, your colleague was saying the fans are still on. So you can imagine the temperatures across the country for most part of the year. And we were collecting that, we were chilling it, we were bringing it to pasteurize it, we were making a range of milk products, we are, converting it into money, and then, paying the milk producer on a daily basis. on a daily basis. Okay.
Wonderful.
So there's the whole terms of aggregation, processing, packaging, branding, the whole A to Z of a supply chain. So unless we can provide that to our people, to our farmers, they're not going to be able to grow the traditional crops.
So
So
was
that's
there
one
any
of the
resistance? Was there any resistance on part of these women beneficiaries of the program? Did they usually when I go and speak to them, they say, नहीं हम तो अपने परिवार का ही ध्यान रखते हैं, उतने में ही हमारा टाइम हो जाता है, so खेत देख लेते हैं. So they do not want to come forward and be part of this. Was this a challenge, and how did you overcome it?
See, women are very hard pressed in the Himalayas. Okay, because many men, because of the market system which has come up, and because of various other reasons, have had to migrate to the urban plains. So more or less, the economy of the Himalayan, at least states like Uttarakhand, it depends a lot on the women. So they are really busy, right from say pre-dawn till the time they finally bed at way past 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock in the night. In terms of collection of fodder and firewood, which takes 4 hours, 5 hours of uphill climb. And their life is very, very tough. Now, what we've done to organize them and, sort of harness their energies, into a productive venture is that, look, it's a slow process. So you begin with a dialogue, okay? You continue with that innovative dialogue. And then what we did was we formed them into small groups, into self-help groups, as they are called in the development language. And these self-help groups, they started saving some 10 rupees every month, And today, the total amount of capital which they've got in their own banking system is 200 lakh rupees, So 200 lakh rupees is in their own bank, and they can loan it out to each other. They can record it in the minutes book. They can operate their bank account. They can, get the loans returned back into their kitty, and they run this whole system. So that's a whole organic system now, a dynamic system which is, which is now 20 years, which is 20, 25 years old in that river basin, So once they have this machinery going on, this organized self-help group federation is working out well, it's a viable, then you can introduce micro enterprises, farming systems and other business programs and leverage on this, because that's what social entrepreneurship is all about. Because if you firstly do not build the social capital, and you try to take a shortcut and make a social enterprise out of it, it's a contradiction in terms, because first you need the money and only then you can do a business, right? So what is social capital? Social capital is that missing capital amongst our poor farmers. So self-help groups is just a vehicle to gather that social capital. And once that social capital is of a critical mass, you can start the business. That's what Umang is. What you've seen in Umang is just the crown of the women's efforts over 20 years, But unfortunately, tragically, most of the bilateral aid programs, which are planned and governed by complete foreigners, whether they're Indian foreigners from the plains or they're foreign foreigners from across the, from other countries than India, from the World Bank and from other organizations, they have just got no idea of what the reality is. So they are pumping in millions of dollars in creating a Umang to begin with. You see, Umang is the end point of this hard work of creating the self-help groups and building that into a dynamic thing. And I'm sorry to say, you can't build a self-help group movement in 1 year or 2 years. It takes time. Number one. Not only takes time, it requires people. I can tell you that with a lot of pride. It requires people who have sufficient skills and knowledge in doing this kind of work. You can't have, can I walk into the All India Medical Institute and say, I will provide my services as a medical professional? I cannot. Because the doctors out there, they have studied and they have practiced medicine for years and years and years. So similarly, social workers, workers and community development professionals, they have studied and practiced it over years and years and years. And therefore, they are qualified to bring forth sustainable change and development. I'm sorry to say, a bureaucrat who's positioned for 1 year or 2 years, or a World Bank officer who's positioned for 1 or 2 years in India, and next year she or he goes to Vietnam or to Timbuktu, they are not the correct change makers. And that is why we see so few Umang, and that is why I see so many people eyeing something like Umang and getting the wrong notion that, hey, we can pop out a Umang tomorrow.
Yeah.
नहीं हो सकता. The government of Meghalaya invited us कि आप आके यहाँ एक उमंग बना दीजिए. Okay. So we told them, why don't you come and spend 10 days with us firstly? They did that. They met the women, they saw all the systems and everything. But when we went to start a TOT program over there, and then they realized there's so much of hard work they have to do. Well, after 4 years, there is no Umang in Meghalaya. And even the products which we have started marketing, on behalf of them, from the Meghalaya Basin Development Authority, it's called, we have started marketing the sticky pink rice, the sticky purple rice, the fresh pineapples from there, which are excellent.
Wow.
We have done business worth 20 lakh rupees to demonstrate to them the viability of this whole process. There's no supply chain, So what I'm trying to say is that many of the times, tragically, development processes are completely in the wrong hands. You see, why did the milk project succeed? Because Dr. Kurian, he made sure he only had officers who had the skills and knowledge.
Right.
And if he depended on, anyone else, Operation Flood would have never succeeded. You see?
Right. So, Kalyanda, Umang, how many women did you start with initially, and how big has it become now?
See, the self-help group started with just 10 women, right? So currently there are only 3,000 of them, right? And out of those 3,000 women, only 2,000 of them are part of the Umang Federation. And that too, it is a slow process, because we can't bring in all 3,000 on the same day by making them shareholders, because Umang must have the capacity to market the produce, to aggregate, store, process, brand, package, and market it. So the whole exercise is a slow process. So each year some new shareholders come into the organization, and that is how the business grows, you see. So currently I think Umang has 1,500 full-time shareholders in
Wow.
Yeah. It's a small organization. Their capacity today...
But still it is an awe-inspiring figure, I must say.
It's awe-inspiring only because, if you ask me, is that they live without a grant. They have been standing on their own 2 feet for 10 years, for 10 financial years. Their business is, close to 1.5, 1.75 crores year on year. They are being able to spend, meet all their expenses, all the salaries and everything else. Plus, they are being able to give a little bonus of 2 lakh, 3 lakh rupees back to the shareholders every year.
Isn't that wonderful?
Yeah. But you see, it's still tragic, because what the Indian Himalayan region needs is at least 50 such organizations. If we have 50 of them, then we have 100 crore rupees worth of business every year. Then we can have a federation, a marketing federation, which can, actually make a dent in the Indian market.
I'm very sure we are moving into the right direction with experts like you and your guidance, Kalyanji.
So that is where organizations like HUM come in, and your idea of the HUM program can actually accelerate this kind of a process in creating a federation, maybe not one federation for the entire Indian Himalayan region, but at least regional federations. You can have one in the Central Himalaya, one in the Western Himalaya, you can have one in the Eastern Himalaya, So these 3 or 4 of these federations are important.
That was the thought we also began with. I'm going to take a break here, and we will have to, Kriti, re-log in.
Yes,
I think because we are running out of this particular time frame of 40 minutes. And Kalyanda, tell me about the work that you are doing and how is the work helping with the problems that you identified for the Himalayan region?
Well, we do a host of activities, because it's a holistic program. But as I said earlier, the community-based drinking water program is sort of the entry point in most of the communities. And that really helps because people with a deficit supply of drinking water, you can imagine, is a big crisis because you have to walk, it takes a lot of time to fetch water from a distant source. And that to the source may be dubious in the sense it may not be totally safe. There can be some E.
Right.
coli contamination, you know. And so the
Mm-hmm.
drinking water program really helps people here and now, immediately. It takes about 1.5 months to set up a system, and then bang on, it immediately helps you because you get about 50 liters of water per person per day, which is a significant amount. Why I mentioned 50 liters is because that's the national norm. The government of India set that up in consultation with international bodies. I think, if I'm not mistaken, it used to be 40 liters per capita per day, and now it's been enhanced to 50. So once people have access to safe drinking water, you see their lifestyle changes for the better immediately in terms of hygiene, better health, etc., etc. And at the end of the day, they save a hell of a lot of time also, and the drudgery of fetching that water from a distant source.
Right. So, Kalyanda, this water storage or the system that you talk about, is it a funded one for the village that you identify, or the village people come together and
See,
make it?
see the
Mm.
see the post-independence, it was the government of the day which have said that water is a fundamental right and it will be provided by the government at large in the state with the help of the center. But because we are in the voluntary sector, so the government sector, all the technocracies which have been set up, typically they are called like Jal Nigam or whatever they are called in every state government. Okay. So the programs are run completely 100% free. That means the entire capital expenditure is borne by the state government, right? They may get aid from the central government, that's a separate issue. But communities
Yes.
don't pay anything for it. And then
Communities don't pay for
thereafter,
it.
even
Mm.
more peculiar is that even the recurring cost of a drinking water system, because you see a pipeline, it may break, it may require some changes, because systems are dynamic, the population
Mm.
increases, you may need another stand post. So
Yeah.
none of the repair and maintenance is also paid by the community in the government system. Okay, so you have a technocracy to implement it, and you have a technocracy to maintain it. So typically in Uttarakhand, they have a Jal Nigam, which will
Ji.
implement it, and you will have a
Mm.
Jal Sansthan, which will maintain it.
Mm.
So now in between these two large corporations, we have people like Grassroots and other small voluntary agencies. And so what we do is we insist, because we have that sort of independence institutionally and legally, as
Ji.
a public sector organization, as a public institution. So we tell the
Ji.
community that, look, we are ready to help you, but we feel that you should pay for at least 10% of the capital
Right.
cost,
Yeah.
and you have to pay 100% of the maintenance cost. So that's a big
So
change from the existing system. So
there's
10%
more
of,
ownership. Huh?
yeah,
Mm.
exactly.
Mm.
So 10% typically, say if the system costs 2 lakh rupees, so they have to, gather together 20,000 rupees, So if there are 50 homes, then they divide it among each other and they collect that money, you know. So that ensures, as you say, some degree of iota of ownership in the whole system. And then whenever anything goes wrong with it, with the drinking water system, they have to call on the barefoot engineers, to help them out with any changes they need, and they have to pay 100% of that. So typically in a year, depending if it's a hand pump system, they may need only 1,000 rupees a year, which is a small amount.
Very
But
small.
there are villages where people wanted a pumping system, And a pumped water supply system has a recurring expenditure of almost 10,000 rupees per month. You see, firstly, there's three-phase electrical connection,
Electrical
bijli ki aata hai.
connections.
Then there is at least one person who's like the operator, like he has to switch on the pump every day, do some cleaning up every day, keep the pump house nicely, and ensure that the system
Yeah.
is functioning well. उसका भी खर्चा है
Yeah.
5,000 6,000 रुपया कुछ आप देना ही पड़ता है ना,
Mm.
तो 10,000 रुपया का
Mm-hmm.
खर्चा है. So there every family is billed 200 rupees or 150 rupees or 300 rupees, whatever be the amount necessary. And every month they pay the linesman, whom they have only appointed. You see? So through community development process, we have been able to do this. That communities can not only pay a portion of the capital cost, but they can pay 100% of the maintenance cost.
Maintenance cost.
So अब
So
क्या
Kalyan, हाँ,
sorry.
एक नौला से लेके आगे कम्युनिटी के लिए वाटर स्टोरेज एंड सिस्टम्स आपने लगाए, और उसके बाद मैं ये भी पढ़ रही हूँ कि यू हैव वर्कड ऑन द रिवर बेसिन रेस्टोरेशन आल्सो. So this journey from a small little storage system has gone on to even restoring the rivers, the river basins. So
Yeah.
can you please talk about the work that you have done for restoring the river basins?
Okay, see, very quickly, when, as I said, it was a need of the community, the drinking water program. So when we started the conversation, we told them, look, you got to do two more things. You have to also invest in a proper sanitation system, because there's a E. coli contamination of open defecation and the drinking water system. Because the
Right.
water capillaries are very shallow. They're within 4-5 feet from the ground level. तो वो इकोलाई contamination होने का संभावना बहुत ज्यादा है. And through all the field testing, water testing kits, we demonstrated to the community. So they agreed for 100% homes to invest in a twin pit water seal Sauchalaya, which we had, got the design, and we had the wherewithal to help them in making it, also through the Barefoot Engineers Guild again. So that, we were subsidizing to the extent of 3,000 to 5,000 rupees, and the remaining 10,000, 15,000 rupees, the family was spending. But with the result, what happened through the drinking water program, because we clubbed it with sanitation, the village got cleaned up, at the same time. And much later, much to our happiness in the voluntary sector, it became a Government of India program. And you must have heard of 25 years ago, they started the Nirmal Gram program, that any village which had 100% sanitized, they would get a huge purushkar. And the purushkar was given by the President of India. There was a big function held. So it was really fantastic. We guys felt that, hey, we started a thing in a small way, but somebody noticed it and they made it into a national program. And would you believe it, that we criticize the government all the time, most of the time, okay? But we don't do any sanitation anymore now for last 10 years, because the Government of India and the state governments, they now subsidize up to 12,000 rupees plus per family to build the same twin pit water seal Sauchalaya. And it's become a national program, as you know, which has got further accelerated in the recent past through the Swachh Bharat program,
Right. So, did any Nirmal Gram awards come in?
Yes, yes. And funnily enough, I mean, the village was already ready. And so the district authorities were very happy that when the Purushkar thing was started by the central government, they had ready-made villages to pesh karo in front of the government.
Oh, yeah.
You understand
So,
what
ready for demonstration.
Yeah. So both in Himachal as well as in Uttarakhand, many of the communities we worked with, they were the first round of recipients of the Nirmal Gram Purushkar. And later, of course,
Wow,
many
wow.
other villages may work.
Wow, that really calls for an
But
applause here.
no, but one thing I would like to mention over here is that the same government of the day in the center, through the state government, we were part of Uttar Pradesh, started a water sector reform program just to get rid of the anomalies of the Jal Nigam and the Jal Sansthan,
Okay.
and they made sure that the NGOs with proven track record, were the torchbearers of this water sector reform program. So along with
Mm-hmm.
Grassroots, there was a host of other organizations which were part of this thing, of this program. And it went off very well. It was called the Sojal program, the Sojal
Mm.
project. And after the
जी
Sojal project, meanwhile, towards the latter part of that program, Uttarakhand state
Mm.
also was formed. Okay. And we
जी
had a chief minister for a while called General Khanduri, and
जी
General Khanduri came to know about Grassroots and other organizations. And you won't believe there was a tripartite agreement between the state
Mm.
government of Uttarakhand, Grassroots,
Mm.
and the Barefoot Engineers Guild to
Mm.
take over villages with chronic water supply problems and provide this system, part A. And part B, which
Mm.
was really important, and they took our advice for it, was to train the Jal Sansthan with
Oh
this technology so that after
okay
we withdraw, the Jal Nigam
yeah
and the Jal Sansthan could continue with it. You know,
continue the good work.
yeah. But as it happened, Unyal Saab, he was the chief general manager of Jal Sansthan, and he took the
जी
initiative, Mr. Unyal, along with the chief
जी
minister of the day, and it went on
जी
beautifully. But then, chief minister got changed, Unyal Saab retired, and it was never continued, for whatever set of
that's
reasons.
how the
But
life
anyway, now
moves. Huh.
coming back to
Hey.
what you started off with. So we said there were two things you got to do along with water. One was
जी
sanitation, which I just talked about. Other was we said you got to look after the catchment area treatment. जहाँ पे बारिश
जी
गिरती है, if that's a
हम्म
naked hillside now, is denuded,
हम्म
you got to
हम्म
plant the appropriate trees so that the kinetic energy of the rainfall, it slows down and percolates into the ground and thereby renews
जी
the hydrology year after year,
हम्म
season after
हम्म
season.
हम्म
So how do we do that? So once
हम्म
again, we started from scratch. We set up 30, 40 small village level nurseries in different areas of the river basin. We train the Mahila or men, whatever be the appropriate thing in that community, to set up
जी
a small village nursery. We
जी
selected mother trees plus trees to collect the acorns from oak trees, from utis,
हम्म
from a host of about 20 very, very robust native species. और उसका
जी
बीज से पौधे उगाए लोगों ने. So some
हम्म
पौधा, it takes 1 year में हो जाता mature.
हम्म
You can plant
जी
it out. Some takes 2 years. So
2 years
all that was methodically done and planted out. And we had a 10-year program. It was supported by the Sir Dorabji Tata Trust from Bombay.
जी
We were supposed to get 1 million trees planted with that budget.
हम्म
We managed to do 1.5 million. So
वाह
1.5 million saplings were raised and planted out by the communities, you know. And it's
how
wonderful to
wonderful
see these village lands now because the trees in 8 years, 10 years time, the saplings, छोटे छोटे पौधे, they grow into medium-sized trees,
ये आप
you know.
नेटिव कौन से नेटिव सैपलिंग्स की बात कर रहे हैं वैरायटीज की बात कर रहे हैं कल्याण
Well, you see the top of the line, the gold star of Kumau out of native species is the oak, बांज के जो पौधे हैं. Now,
मार्च
depending on the altitude, there are two,
हम्म
three, the quercus species. So you have the
हम्म
banj oak, you have kharsu, you have tilonj, you have different oaks growing in different altitudes. And then you have a tree which is like the fastest growing Himalayan tree possible called utis.
जी
Is the alnus species. In English में
ओके
उसको alder कहते हैं, ALDER.
जी
इंग्लैंड में भी होती है, बट जहाँ भी
जी जी जी
पहाड़ों
हम्म
में थोड़ा बहुत पानी होगा तो उतीस के पेड़ दिखेगा. you know so
जी
that's a very, very good soil and moisture conservation species. Then of course you have the willow. Not just the
जी
weeping willow, there is one more, there are two varieties of salix. And then you have the deodar, which is like a precious tree. Then you have
वेरी
the
प्रेशियस
cypress. Then I mean, there's a whole host of trees here. आप कभी आएंगे तो you can spend a whole day with the community in seeing some of the forests which they have raised, starting from
जी
that seed. So it's possible to do that. Now, if you have a statewide or an Indian Himalayan region program in planting native species, if a small organization like Grassroots can do 1.5 million trees, take a guess, you can do 15 million. you know. And
I'm
if you can,
reminded of small steps and the giant leap. So
hmm.
small, organizations like Grassroots doing such wonderful work
There are
and
others
taking
also.
us
I mean,
leaps
where we
and
started,
bounds.
yeah, you look at Chirag. If you visit Chirag, Chirag started the tree planting program when we were there in 87, 88. Okay. And I don't know what is the last count, but perhaps they have planted even more trees than what Grassroots has
Of
done.
course, of
And
course.
next door is Arohi. Arohi's founder,
Uh-huh.
Una, was extremely passionate about trees. So they started a tree planting program. And there are a host of other organizations which have done similar kind of work. By no stretch of imagination, Grassroots is the only organization in the Himalayas. You must know that. And I
Of
suppose
course.
through your visits and Deepak's visits in the Himalayan region, you all have met several organizations by now.
Yes, Kalyanda. So, Kalyanda, which takes me to the next question that I have for you is, what do you expect from the people on the Himalayas to be, or people who are visiting the Himalayas to be considerate about when they are there? I can see a lot of people just come for holidays, and when they go back we see see a lot of mess. Of course, in cities we have systems to clean, but Himalaya is lacking those
Mm.
systems. So what is your message for the people who are visiting Himalayas, or how do you want to encourage people to become more aware of the mess that they create when they go on holidays, and what is the responsibility that they should take?
Look, that is just the tip of the iceberg. If there's a
Yes.
tourist who visits the mountains and if they, litter that area, what you're pointing out, it's a problem of litter. Okay.
Yeah.
But more than that, I mean, of course, that's a problem, and I will say something about that soon. But what strikes me immediately about this whole influx of people from urban India who come to the hills,
Mm.
not only as
Yeah.
a visitor, but as you know now, there are thousands and thousands of them who own cottages there. You know,
Correct.
and
Mm.
the point I am trying to make is in 1987, which is just the other day. It's like 40 years ago. I'm not talking of 35 years ago. I'm not talking of like
Right.
100 years ago. Okay. It's in our times. We have
Right.
people, Kanai and Lakshmi, the founders
Mhm.
of Chirag. They were 65 years old. They lived all their lives in Tokyo and London and New York and all these beautiful cities. But they could come back to a little village without bijli, without plumbing, without sanitation, and start
Mm.
living there and spearhead a whole movement, attract young people like Anita and me and Una and Suchil and others and started a whole movement. So what is it that stops people today who own cottages there and who are that same age of 60, 65?
Yeah.
None of them have even an iota of love, or respect, or basically a understanding of the simplicity of mountain people's existence. And the
That's
fact
so unfortunate. Mm.
that mountain people, the Himalayan people, why do we do pranam to them? Because
Yeah.
willy-nilly, they are the custodians of this entire biodiversity hotspot and the
Rightly
water
said.
supply, you know. So
Yeah.
if we do not have some amount of, what shall I say, for want of a better word, some amount of sensitivity and
Mm.
respect when we visit the mountains or we have a second home over there, you know, it sort of, it doesn't look very good because you see, people in the communities, they look at you as an outsider who's come in and built a cottage and and so the way you behave, the way you walk, the way you sit, the way you lead your life, it has a massive impact on the rest
Of
of the
course.
community. And therefore you
Yeah.
should feel responsible in, if not anything, at least adopt some simplicity in your life. You know, तो लिटरिंग तो एक छोटी सी प्रॉब्लम है जो बहुत बड़ा प्रॉब्लम बन जा रही, वो अलग बात है, you know. But more than, if the litter problem is also solved through technology and through administration, which will happen, it will happen. But if people's attitude do not change, Anju, I feel that
जी
that is a bigger tragedy, you know, in the Himalayan region, because it is setting such a wrong example for the younger generation in the mountain communities, you know, that we must try and so I was telling myself and some friends and colleagues that maybe we should write about Kanaya and Lakshmi, and
जी
make that and make it widely available to people so
व्हाई
that they
नॉट
get some inspiration out of, कि ऐसे भी लोग होते थे,
बिल्कुल कल्याण दा मैंने आपकी बहुत सारे काम के बारे में अभी सुना the amount of work that you have phenomenal. I just do not, the time has just passed and I don't know how much of information is still there within you to share with us, and because of this limited time that we have, we can't do justice in fact to the skill, the knowledge that you have about the Himalayan ecosystem, and so much of work and contribution has already been done under your guidance by Grassroots India. How do you want to describe your own journey?
What do you mean? Look,
Say, talk about how fulfilling has it been? Have you enjoyed your work of 35, 40 years that you've done? Uh,
look, look.
did you want to be, did you
I
wish to
consider.
be,
Hmm, yeah, continue.
did you wish it to be any different from what it has been? Would you
Just,
want to change some part of it?
just a little bit. Let me
जी,
answer the first bit. Okay,
okay,
I consider myself blessed. Okay,
जी,
that I could cut my teeth with the National Dairy Development Board, with the giants like Dr. Kurian, Miss Patel, and several others. Okay,
right.
and then we hived out and came to the mountains, and only
Mm,
because of those initial years of what we learned how to do community development processes, that Anita and me managed to be so-called successful in spearheading our activities over there. We have no regret for our lifestyle or our work, okay, because we've been very, very fortunate and very blessed, okay, to be able to do, every time we have had a problem, somebody's come and opened up the door or a window and we've, gone through it,
yeah,
properly. It's never been a hindrance. And we were blessed with a little child when we came to the hills, and he grew up there. He walked up to the village school about 5 kilometers every day. Sorry,
oh,
5 kilometers
wow.
both ways. It was 2 kilometers, 2.5 from Sitla to
Going, yeah,
Mukteshwar and then back. And he was educated there up to his class 12. And so he's doing well. Again, touch wood, God bless. He's got his own small family now. And so personally, it's been a great journey. And look, the fact that we've been able to work for over 30, 40 years now with mountain communities, you think it doesn't impact you? You know how much we've learned in terms of just leading a
because
life which is very, 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 very fulfilling, with the community. And now let me finish up by saying, which is that iota of regret, that we don't have giants like Dr. Kurian to do this Indian Himalayan region marketing federation. I really feel sad about that we could not reach out to these 70 million homes. Whereas we have the knowledge based on the milk project, that how to do it, but we don't have anyone to get it done now. A
but
perspective plan is not yet been made for the Indian Himalayan region. Would you believe it?
जी बट कल्याणदा आपकी जर्नी इतनी इंस्पायरिंग है. I'm sure there are a lot of others who will listen to this podcast and the YouTube channel through. They'll connect to you, and this inspiring journey of yours will also inspire them to take up something and do something for the Himalayan region. Um, Absolute pleasure, in fact, today to talk to you. And I am myself very enriched by all the knowledge that you have passed on today for all of us. My name is Anju Bahri. I'm joined by Akriti Chaurasia, and we are from Himalaya Unnati Mission. I thank you once again, Kalyanda, for joining us today. Wish you
Thank
a
you,
great
both of
life.
you, Anju and Akriti. Thank you very
Pranams.
much.